I'd like to welcome everyone tonight to our artist talk with Alexander Hernandez, our current and inaugural artist in residence at New Museum Los Gatos. He has a show on view now, RETAZOS New Works by Alexander Hernandez, artist in residence at New Museum Los Gatos, that you can come to the museum and see in person through October 9th. And I'd like to start the night off with a land acknowledgement. We acknowledge that New Museum Los Gatos sits on the ancestral lands of the Ohlone, the Tamian Ohlone, and the Muwekma Ohlone people who have stewarded this land throughout the generations. We recognize their connection to this region and give thanks for the opportunity to live, work, and learn on their traditional homeland. We pay respects to the elders and to all Ohlone people, past and present. And with that, I'd like to remind everyone that New Museum Los Gatos is open Thursdays, 3 to 8 p.m. So it's open right now if you want to hop over and check out the show after this talk. And Fridays through Sunday, 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. So check out the website for more information. Thank you to the sponsors of RETAZOS, with the generous support of Penumbra, the Baymec Community Foundation, and the Waitte Foundation. We'll also be hosting the Content Magazine Pickup Party next week around this time. So mark your calendar, Thursday, September 1st. New Museum Los Gatos is excited to present a complete show, a complete celebration with performers Hota Mercury and Frida Mott, curated by Alexander Hernandez, who will also be performing songs by, be performing songs that are referenced in RETAZOS by Alexander. So that's very exciting. I can't wait. I'm definitely attending. All right, Alex, do you want to share your slides and we'll hear from you.
Yes, well, thank you all for coming to the talk. And so I don't know, was it 2 years ago or a year and a half ago? I lost track of time, but the new museum approached me about doing a residency and they wanted to hear some ideas, and we talked a little bit, and I came down there and I saw their collection. And so we were kind of trying to, see what we can do together for a new show, or if I should curate some of their collection, or if I should make work based on their collection. So it was kind of an interesting process. So looking through some other collection, I found some really interesting quilts that I really loved. And a lot of my work deals with patchwork because I like to talk about identity and how, especially a first generation immigrant like myself, how we kind of never feel like we belong neither here nor there. And so patchwork is really important to me because I'm able to create my own identity based on, where my family comes from, based where I'm, and also with where I'm at, where I've been. And there's also some pop cultural references. So I really wanted to take some of these quilts that I found in their collection and kind of play off of that. And also going through the collection, I felt like I was kind of going through a thrift store or like a vintage shop, because there was just some really interesting stuff too, like silver platters and antique china, like different things. But I just really was pulled by these quilts. And so and also I've been collecting like unfinished quilts and unfinished quilt squares for the longest time, and this kind of gave me the idea to go back to that a little bit. So what I wanted to do was what I originally wanted to do was scan some of this stuff and then create some fabric, which I'm still gonna do later on this year. But I also, it also kind of inspired me to go back to quilting, something that I haven't done for a while, and so I wanted to continue to do that. And also, during the pandemic, right around the same time that they asked me, I made this quilt actually, and it was made from like stuff that I had laying around, things from exes and like clothes that I just didn't wear anymore, but I didn't want to get rid of yet because it kind of meant something for me. And so that was the same thing that I kind of felt about the quilts that were in the collection. And so I started getting ideas from the collection. And so this piece was kind of a prototype of what I was going to do eventually. It was during the pandemic, and I felt like I felt like so much was happening, but nothing was happening at the same time at the beginning of the pandemic. So I told my ex at the time, like, I just feel so bored, but yet overwhelmed at the same time. And I've been wanting to do stuff with text for the longest time. So I wanted to continue that. And then here's some detail. So I just wrote what was in my head at the time. So this kind of like was the prerequisite. I can't even speak of it anymore. To that, and then this is another piece that I did during this time where I kind of was I made some soft sculptures that were kind of reflecting what everybody else was doing at the time, which was binging a lot of TV, working at home, you know, being on our computers all day. Whether it was watching YouTube or working, you know, we were always on our laptop. So I wanted to capture that in this. And I also wanted to kind of create like a world of those two things together, my quilts and my soft sculptures to kind of meet. And so I around the same time I started to make work that was based on this is a series called Slumber Party, which during the pandemic I started collecting things that I wanted as a kid that I didn't have. So then I started buying all these things, but I also found some of these things at thrift stores. And so I wanted to kind of create what I was feeling at the time, which was, you know, uh, kind of like I felt like I was, you know, at a sleepover and we were just all watching TV and doing these things. And at the beginning, it was really fun and and but then eventually I started feeling suffocating um, by everything that was going on because I just, you know, staying at home, going to work, and not really being able to like socially engage with other people kind of started to drive me crazy. So I wanted to make this work that kind of reflected that, and so that's where you know, Slumber Party started, and these are some of the pieces that are actually being shown there. And I also started to mix, you know, not just textile stuff, but also like acrylic nails. And so seeing some of the collection also inspired me to like kind of play with materials as well. So not just working with quilting or patchwork, but also like and you'll see through the slideshow how I was able to incorporate like everyday objects as well. Because I was really interested how, you know, the collection at the new museum had a picture from Diane Arbus, but they also had like a cereal. I think it was a Wheaties cereal of Michelle Kwan, and I just really loved like that how there was this, you know, famous photo in this collection, but at the same time there was this cereal box that was signed by Michelle Kwan that was really significant to somebody, you know. And I'm the kind of person who I love thrift stores. I love, you know, going through stuff, and I sometimes find objects and I feel like there's something in them that others can't see, and I think that's something that a lot of artists do. So I wanted to combine not just art but also like everyday objects. And this is another piece that was in the collection called 7 Minutes in Heaven. So all these pieces are based on like sleepover games. So the other one was Side and Seek. This one's 7 Minutes of Heaven. And there's something kind of very like, you know, colorful and playful about them, which I kind of, I kind of want people to gravitate towards them because they're, visually colorful and playful. But then, eventually you realize there's something kind of else going on here. Like, and a lot of my work is like that. A lot of my work is like, what's going on here? Like I want people to kind of pull in their own ideas of what's going on, because once, and this is true with every artist, once your artwork leaves the world, it's no longer really yours anymore. Everybody, it belongs to the world, and everybody's going to interpret it differently. So I kind of want to have a little bit of mystery, but a little bit of fun in there as well. And so it can mean a lot of things, but a lot of the same themes are in there, with domesticity and identity, and so I make a lot of stuff that's kind of open ended, but also personal to me at the same time. I like using patchwork, because, like I said earlier, like, or did I? No, I think I was just in our opening, so I might confuse different things together. But one of the reasons I like to work with patchwork is because um, I like to mix all my identities together: my Latin identity, my queer identity, uh, but also I like to use pop cultural items that I find, because I think that a lot of that stuff, cartoons, anime, also informs their identity, especially queer identity. Um, and so I wanted to have that in the collection as well. And also I was also kind of informed by the collection. So oh, why is it not going to the next slide? And so this is one of the quilts from the collection that I was really inspired by. It's a crazy quilt. So it's probably from the 1920s is what I'm guessing, because that was really popular during the 20s. And so I was really fascinated by it, because it kind of it took me back to growing up in Colorado, but also, like, my home. And I was also really interested in how not just immigrants like myself, but also queer people like to take things that we find, in thrift stores, or we find at estate sales, and we kind of like to repurpose them. And it's also the only way that sometimes, for me growing up, working class, sometimes finding these things are like the only way that we can ever have fancy stuff, if that makes any sense. And then we repurpose them differently. And also growing up and then moving to San Francisco, I moved in with some drag queens. And so the whole idea of like repurposing things was kind of important, because I would literally make some of their outfits made out of stuff that I would find in the Tenderloin and in thrift store. So I was really kind of going back. I felt like I was going back a little bit to go forward and making the new body of work. And so I was really moved by all the patches that were in this quilt, um, because it was kind of, there's something beautiful about how, like, it's beautifully messy in a way, and it's also like chaotic, but at the same time it just create something totally new and totally its own identity. And so and also one of the reasons that I like that I got into patchwork and quilting and all that is because growing up I was fascinated by, the way that people would put patches on their denim jackets and their jeans, and you put your band's name on your jacket, and in a way that kind of informs people who you are and what your identity is, because you put what kind of music you listen to, or you put on a nationality flag, or like a club that you're part of. Like, there's something interesting about putting all these things together. And so I was really inspired to kind of go back to that. And so a few months after they invited me to participate in this residency, I like I said, the other quilt that had text on it was kind of my prototype. I wanted to go back to text. And so I was like, well, why don't I just, continue that? And then during this time is when I broke up. I had a really big breakup during during last year, and so I wanted to do something with that. And so I actually started to listen to a lot of old music that my mom used to listen to when she was cleaning the house. And then a lot of it was just like really sappy songs about romance or about breakups. And then I realized, oh my God, I turned into my mother. But also like I also like suddenly resonated with her, and there was this connection with her again because I realized like I'm now at the age that she was when I started hearing these songs, and these songs didn't make any sense to me growing up. And now that I gone through some of the same stuff she has, like I suddenly understood, that she probably had heartache, and she probably broke up with people too, and like all these things that like or parents go through and also like I realized like, oh yeah, my mom had an identity before me. Like my mom, like I do things that my mom doesn't know I do, or my sisters don't, like there was all these things that came up, and suddenly I felt like I got her. And so I wanted to do something with these songs, and I started to break apart these songs, or like deconstruct them, and also picking up like lyrics that I didn't get as a kid, and now I kind of understand them more. But also as a first generation Latino, like we don't learn Spanish the same way that other people do. Like it's kind of broken, and so there kind of is a period for some Latinos to relearn Spanish. And so going to Mexico and meeting like other Latino artists and curators that speak Spanish, like and being introduced to like new words and new things, I suddenly started to understand different words and different phrases. And so there was a kind of like a relearning Spanish again, and also suddenly finding poetry in these songs that I didn't get as a kid, and now I understand them. And so for example, this quilt, and I actually spray painted on this quilt, estas cosas raras de la vida, these weird things in life. Like there was something beautiful about it. um and it was also kind of mirroring what was happening to me last year at the same time. And then this one, Nothing Left for Me, No Me Queda Más, is a Selena song that's very popular. That was also, I thought it was like a celebratory song as a kid, but now later on I found there was a double meaning, and it was about, it was a breakup song about like there's nothing left for me. And so I suddenly realized there was something else. And so that phrase suddenly changed for me, and it totally had a different meaning for me. And actually, this quilt is a quilt that I actually made like maybe 2010, 2011. And so I actually cut it up, and I also added more fabrics on top that I felt would go well with this. And then this is actually one of the first quilts that I started to do the text on first. And I don't know why I decided spray paint, but I wanted something fast, and something and also I've been informed by graffiti artists, and also some of my family work in construction, so there was always like spray paint or like mark making of some kind growing up. And so I kind of wanted to mix those worlds together. But then also I also added some patches that kind of reminded me of traditional Mexican textiles, you know um and so I wanted to mix my Americana upbringing mix with my Mexican heritage, but also like all these other things that are kind of like my teen, like my teen angst came out again. And so I just spray painted this quilt to kind of reflect what was going on with me at the same time. And also, I don't know if you can see, but like this is also a point where I started to stay away from. I feel like a lot of artists try to stay very painterly, by stretching. I've met other textile artists that kind of want to make their work look as much as the painting as they can. So they'll stretch they'll stretch it on a stretcher frame. And so I actually wanted to do the opposite and kind of embrace, the wrinkles and the way that gravity just makes these fabrics, just fall. And so, and also kind of, it also kind of gives it a kind of like a smile a little bit. This piece for some reason kind of reminds me a little bit of a jack-o'-lantern, where you kind of see like the teeth and the eyes. So I wanted to embrace, like the textile, and so I wanted to create that sagging feel. And it also kind of remind us, that these are repurposed from things that we see every day to like art. And then you can kind of see a detail. And so I also started to embellish around the graffiti that I did, to kind of like, connect it with the quilt that it's on top of. And then this is another quilt. And so some of these quilts are, they were either unfinished or they were finished, but I cut them up again and I reassembled them. And then I, spray painted them and embellished them even more, to kind of give these different layers of of and like I said, like to reflect what I was going through at the time. But also they're also kind of open-ended phrases that kind of can mean a lot of different things, because even though this might mean something for me, I want viewers to kind of get their own, like, even though some of these phrases might be somber, for other people it might mean something else. So for example, pero esta vez, but this time, might totally feel like something else for somebody else. And so yeah, so I started to deconstruct all these quilts that I found, and going back to quilts that I started and I didn't finish them. And so here's some more detail. And you can also see like I also kind of went back to my punk days of like, embellishing my own clothes to kind of connect all these different stages of, not just my life, but also my artistic practice. And then, like I said, like I started, I've been collecting also like old linens. And so this is where I started to like repurpose those things again. And so this one, for example, I this quilt that I kind of had kind of reminded me a little bit of an American flag. So I wanted to kind of create that, but then I used this linen that I had laying around, uh that had some like, Mexican, like Americans idea, an American idea of like, a fiesta, which I have like a love-hate relationship with some of those things that I find, when you find like embroideries of like the sleeping Mexican, there's a kind of like I find it cute, but at the same time I'm like, like, I don't know about that. But so I for this one I wanted to um to write, my heat will burn, and some, also some of these phrases, like I try to get them as closely to translate it to English as possible, but at the same time, there's just something that's not going to be fully. Some phrases just can't translate the same way. So for this one, I had a hard time actually deciding whether to call it, my body heat will burn you, or but I think this is the closest that I can get it. So mi calor te quemará, which is kind of like in the song, kind of is, about, I think it's about lovemaking probably, but I read it differently. Like, I think it's about resilience, and kind of like don't mess with me, kind of attitude, I guess. Um, and so yeah, so I started y- to mix these different worlds together. Oh, and this is probably, and you can see that, and this is like one of the later pieces of work. You can kind of see how they kind of evolve, because they kind of went, some of them are kind of a little bit, you can tell that where I started, and this one I kind of got better at it. So this one is made out of, different quilt squares that I found, and then I cut it apart, and then I found other fabric that I felt like went with it, and to piece it together. And then I added some appliques like this angel, and I also found some chili peppers, And this one is Nada es como ayer, which is nothing is like yesterday. So a lot of these, like I said, a lot of these texts kind of have like open-ended kind of like, is this about, you know, nostalgia? Is this about like, you know, remembering? Is this about like, there's a lot of different meanings that people can have. And also I try to be playful because there could be some melancholia to that phrase, but I'm also thinking about like the happy, like, you know, the happy moments from yesterday. So there, it can be a lot of different layers, and people are going to read it differently. And so yeah, and you can kind of just see how better I got at using the spray paint. Or, and actually this one is actually not a spray paint, but this is actually I actually ended up buying like fabric and vinyl spray paint that kind of is more archival for fabric. And also one thing about these this body of work, and this is kind of when I started to also also kind of I also stopped trying to preserve things a little bit. Like I kind of want some of my quilts and my textile work to kind of age the same way that some of the stuff that I find um like in thrift stores and estate sales, like I love finding like a quilt that's like falling apart. And you know, and so I actually purposely try to use fabrics that I know are going to age well, or they're going to, like, you know, when the colors start to fade. I also collect a lot of denim because denim like ages beautifully and falls apart beautifully. So I'm also kind of thinking about how I want these pieces to age, because I don't want my work to kind of age, you know, I don't want them to be preserved like paintings. I want them to kind of you know, to change color and to like fade, and the sun's gonna do stuff to it as well, you know. And also like the paint might the paint might go away in a few years, you know, and it might leave some of the original color behind, you know, because the sun took the other you know, the other fabric away. So I kind of I'm kind of looking forward to see what these look like, let's say when I'm in my 60s. Or I mean, you probably won't see any changes until I'm 80 or so, but still, I want them to age beautifully. And so this is kind of a gallery shot that I took from the show to kind of see. From the left is the piece that inspired me. To the right is the piece that kind of was the starter of my text work. And then also, like I said earlier, like I wanted to repurpose like objects that I found. And so this is actually a piece that I had that I didn't know what to do with. And then when went to the collection, I loved this chair and I wanted to do something with it. And so my original idea was actually to have a lot of these legs sitting on top of these chairs, but I also wanted to not but I also wanted to show the pattern that was on the chair. So so I didn't want to, like, you know. So anyways, I basically like just like decided to like kind of have the scene where these legs are kind of being like kind of kind of like using like a machine claw to kind of slightly like throne these legs, you know, to give them, you know, a space to sit at. And so I started to play with like the way objects can be used alongside my work. And this is another shot. And then I'll go into some of the self sculpture stuff that I also created. So you can kind of see like how uh the how they kind of start feeling like this is like a world that you live in. And also I wanted to originally, I mean, originally, I think they were going to put like a vinyl for the title of the show, but I actually um, wanted to do something different. So I chose different fabrics and I made letters of each one um, to kind of reflect the work that was in here. Oh, and I forgot to mention, sorry, you all, but retazos means scraps in Spanish, because there's really no, and that's the thing that I love about living in these two worlds, speaking English and speaking Spanish, is that there's some, like I said, there's no word for patchwork in Spanish. Um, and so retazos is the kind of the closest, because it means like remnants or scraps. That's the closest thing. And so I love that also, that I kind of know that and other people might miss it. And this is another piece that I had that I wanted to interact with some of the collection. So actually started this piece at Mass Mocha, but then I sometimes make stuff and then I put it in a corner because I don't know how to finish it, or I feel like I'll another material will come by that will make this piece just, perfect. And so when I saw this ottoman, I thought like something needs to go on top of this. And also I found these work boots. I think at my work, they were abandoned. I don't remember. It was in the lost and found or something. And they reminded me of like a lot of like my stepdad's friends, would wear these to work. And so there was something familiar about it. And so that's also what I was talking about earlier about, like, how sometimes we connect to objects that maybe don't mean nothing to somebody, but then to me it just like it invokes something in me because I remember seeing them. And also I wanted to change them up a little bit. I think the next photo you'll see, I wanted actually, instead of using shoelaces, I wanted to use ribbon, to kind of be playful with them. And then you can kind of see my work kind of talking together. And then I also started to make these sculptures. I've been doing a lot of, I don't know if you all know my other work where I do surrogates, and usually they're like, life-size bodies. But I started to also make these leg sculptures that I kind of, and you saw one earlier. I wanted to, and they kind of change according to where they're placed, because I also take photographs of some of them, and so sometimes I'll take photographs of them in the desert, or like, so these legs look like they're popping out of a bush, or like, so I kind of like to be playful with that. And so I wanted to be playful again, and in the gallery this time actually. So I had a lot of these legs, and so I placed them together and I sewed them together. And I really love the way that they kind of they sit on these pedestals. And also they also change based on like location, like these sit differently in nature and outside that they do in the gallery. And also there's something about the specific size of pedestal that makes them kind of line up like this. And I also love that you don't know what's going on. Is somebody crossing their legs? Is somebody, and there's also kind of creates a movement, like when you see in cartoons where like, when somebody runs and their legs are kind of doing this, and there's like, you know, four legs drawn, but it's actually two. So I wanted to be playful with that as well, where, like I said, you don't know if somebody's crossing their legs. Is there something more intimate going on? Is this one person? Is this more than one person? I kind of want the viewers to kind of bring their own ideas to these pieces. And like I said, I love using pop culture references too, and patterns as well. And so, yeah. And so here's another one on the other side of the gallery. And then I love how it kind of connected my Slumber Party series with this new text work that I created for the museum. And I don't even know what to call these text pieces yet either. So if you all have any good ideas, let me know, because I think I'm going to continue making some of these text pieces um, for a minute. And then there was this giant wall in the back, at the back of the museum, that I really wanted to make like a giant piece for. So I challenged myself to do it. So I actually I found this really old quilt, and I purposely looked for like quilts that were falling apart, because I just love, and this is probably something that artists do, where we like to find weird stuff that other people don't, they other people will just see whatever, but we kind of see something beautiful about things falling apart, are things changing color. So I really love the stains in this fabric, and I also love that there was giant holes in them because I wanted to repurpose this. So I cut it up again, and then I also made it really long to be playful. And I also, like I said, I'm trying to stay away from paintings. So you kind of create this, like, these waves on the top to kind of reference curtains a little bit. So this is like, I think 15 feet long. It's a little over 15 feet long and like 35 inches tall. And so for this one, I use gold. It looks a little mustardy, but it's actually kind of a gold fabric spray paint, and I wrote "Nunca es suficiente," uh, and then you can barely see at the end. There's some letters on the right side. It says "Para mí." So from afar, you see, nothing is enough, nothing is enough, and then with little letters, you kind of see like "For me." So there's kind of like you'll read something at first, and then when you get closer, you'll read something totally different. And so I made this specifically for the back, and I really love the way that I think you can kind of see some details here, and you can kind of see that excuse me, there were some giant holes in the quilt, and so I went through my my scraps, and I really loved the way that like this metallic scrap was peeking. I literally would put different fabrics behind these holes to see what would look good, and I just really love the way that this kind of metallic-y, satiny fabric and it kind of invokes a little bit like wounds, a little bit, but it's also kind of playful. And like I said, like I was in, like living with drag queens a lot. I really get. I started loving like sequin fabrics, and so I love that this pink kind of it can reference blood, like like wounds a little bit, but it's not. They're kind of like pink, it's kind of like shiny and pretty. So it kind of invokes different things in different people. And then and this is another gallery shot, some other work, and I think that was pretty much it. So if you and then like for the drag performances, um they're going to be performing a couple of the songs from the songs that I chose for these pieces. So that's going to be really interesting to capture that. So if you all have any questions about my work, or any questions lined up, let me know.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Just to start off the conversation, I think this is one thing that we haven't really talked about in other artist talks yet, but you mentioned it just at the end. The color pink is really a strong through line for most of your pieces, and you even helped us choose that color for like our exhibition graphics materials. So can you talk a little bit about like maybe what the significance of that specific color pink is to you?
Well, it's I mean, I kind of magenta is sometimes I'm drawn to it. Sometimes it's called Mexican pink, where it's a pink that I see when I go to Oaxaca or when I go to other parts of Mexico, where it totally means something else in Mexico. But then growing up in Colorado, like pink was seen as like a gay homo color growing up in the 90s. And so I kind of embracing both of them, like the gay pink, but also the Mexican pink, where like I'm embracing those things. And I mean, and this is, I mean, now pink is kind of like a cool color, but growing up it was kind of like a sissy color. And I kind of like I kind of wanted to kind of like take that back and be like, this is, and it's also just a color that just ties a lot of my work together. Pink is kind of for me at least, I liked it, kind of ties different colors together. And also you'll see from my work, like I sometimes mix and match colors that shouldn't work together, but by adding colors in between, they kind of work. And sometimes pink is one of those colors.
It's unifying on many levels.
Right. And were there any questions that anybody had in the chat that maybe?
Yeah, I see one here. Have you ever explored creating wearables?
Actually, I was thinking, I mean, I've done, so there was a a time in my life where I embellished all my clothes, and I and I wanted to kind of and I only did it because I wanted to have stuff that other people didn't have. And I know, and there's a lot of people that have told me like, "Hey, why don't you do a fashion line? And why don't you do this?" And it's just that sometimes I just once you go into fashion, you kind of I don't want to ever have to mass produce anything. Do you know what I mean? So
Hmm.
I don't want to get to that level, because if it is successful, then I don't want people to expect me to just do that. I still want to make quilts. I still want to make these other things. And so I actually recently did start to do I recently started to bleach and play with like kind of shibori. Shibori dyeing, you usually like fold a bunch of, you do all these patterns with the fabric and then you put them in dye. I did the opposite and I put it in bleach. So it takes away the color, and I got some really interesting stuff out of it. But I've been thinking about doing some wearable stuff, but I'm still trying to think about how to make it art, because I don't want to get into, like, I don't want it to be like a business, if that makes sense. I still want it to be art. I don't want it to be something that's trendy. I want it to be like something. So I'm still kind of figuring that out a little bit. Um and like I said, I don't I there's been a lot of times where people have, you know, not just this, but other things where like, oh, why don't you do prints like this and prints like that? And I do think about it, but I just don't want to. If it takes up, I don't want that thing to take away time from my other things. So I have to kind of try to find the middle ground. So I have been thinking about making some wearable stuff, but I would only do it like in a small like batch. And also how to, and that's the other thing, is like I've made things before, and then somebody wants to pay me like $20 for it, and I'm not putting all that work for that. Like if I'm going to make something, I want it to be like, these are not mass produced Target clothes. These are like one of a kind. I don't know if that makes sense, but like I
Yeah.
and it took it's so just follow my Instagram and you'll see if that comes up later.
Yeah, we'll stay tuned. I know it definitely requires you to create and like think on a different scale
Right.
and use your time differently. So, um, another question is, are you continuing to explore using songs and lyrics in your work? Like, has that evolved since this series?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, actually, I started making a whole list on my phone. It's just that these pieces that I made for this were kind of a reflection of what's going on with me at the time. But also, I think it also kind of reflects what was happening in the pandemic. Like, when you read nothing is like yesterday. There's something, that phrase kind of feels so close, right? Because
Yeah.
we're kind of like in a new stage, in a new era. This is like, the pandemic has kind of been like the September 11th of you know what I mean? Like it's kind of like, and there is a lot of nostalgia. Uh, so I personally like chose these specific phrases because not only are they personal to me, but I also feel like it reflects what other people are feeling at the time. Does that make
Mhm.
sense? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I love the way you have taken these lyrics from a time and completely recontextualized them, like you were talking about with "My Heat Will Burn You." Like it's so powerful, and it's also very visually emotional to me. The way that you've like used that quick gestural spray paint to put
Well,
them there.
and
It's
by using that, I think that a lot of times quilters and people that sew like to keep things neat and like precise. But the way that I was introduced to fabric was like being a punk and cutting things up and using, making things fray. And so I wanted to go back to that and kind of like, and using spray paint as like, like you said, gesture. I wanted to, there's something beautiful about like urban decay, and like there's something beautiful about things falling apart in a way. And I mean, if you think about it, like nature sometimes, the Grand Canyon is kind of like, you know what I mean? Like
Mhm.
where it's something that's kind of like it's taking years and it's beautifully decaying. And like it's just, that's kind of, I guess, my take on that. So
It's sort of, sometimes these things, like especially in nature, are so beautiful and precious to us because they're ephemeral.
right.
So
And
it's like,
so I try to do that with my work as well, where I'm trying to stay away from like making things precise, and that's also why you'll see that some of my quilts like are lumpy, or like, you know, one corner will be longer than the other, because I want to reflect, I think. And also I'm the kind of person, and also I don't know if you realized that I've been using D-rings, and I've been purposely showing them as part of the design, because I had a friend who was using the D-rings to hang her stuff, but she was hiding them, you know. And I'm the
mm,
opposite, where I've always been the kind of person who like this is who I am, and I want that reflected in my work too, where like, and not only am I using this to hang the pieces from, but it's going to be part of the design, and I don't want to show, I don't want to hide it, or I don't want to, like, you know, and it's part of what it is. And so that's kind of, and that's the same thing with, like, you know, like I said, the themes falling apart, and holes and stuff like that.
it's like brutal honesty almost too.
Right. Oh, and I just read one of these questions. How do you control your stash? It must be an amazing collection. Most people who work in textile are kind of borderline hoarders. Like I hoard so much. I have so much fabric in my studio. It's not even funny. And I should organize it at some point. That's the thing, is sometimes I try to organize it, but then I always end up going through it and kind of making a mess anyway. So like I think I'm pretty sure my studio is a fire hazard right now. But because I made so much of this work and so fast that I sometimes didn't. I have like a controlled chaos, let's just say, in my studio right now. But yeah, I have a lot of fabric, and I don't know how to, and I'm trying to only make stuff with what I have right now, unless it's a specific color that I think I really need. For
Yeah, have you put like an embargo on buying new remnants right now?
exactly, pretty much. Any I like the femininity of the pink ribbon playing with the masculinity of the work boots. Oh, thank you. Well, I mean, for that, I also kind of, with some of my pieces, I kind of reimagine myself as what I would do with these materials as a boy. Like if I, growing up, well, that's the other thing, is I actually wanted to learn how to sew when I was a kid. But my mom told me no, because that was women's work. So sometimes I reimagine things, like what would my 10-year-old self do with these materials? And so that's
Wow.
something that I would do with those boots. You know what I mean? Like what would happen if I would have been able to be myself at that young age, you know? So some of these works are playful for that reason.
Wow.
Yeah.
May I say something?
Yeah.
Hey, my name's Sid, and I just want to thank you, Alexander. Your work is exciting, and it just I feel like it's very creative. In fact, your studio condition, there's a famous saying that a creative mess is better than idle tidiness, and that's very true. And I think your work is so valid as an art form. There are just a couple of things I was going to say. I appreciate your sense of humor, and it's
Oh,
found
thank you.
in all your pieces, and how you approach your pieces. I agree with that how each patch that you find or you put on has a uniqueness to it, and I think that's great. You see that. I just want to thank you for your honesty and sharing your soul. Just two other things, but can you let other people know about the drag show and how to access it?
Oh yeah, it's next Thursday at NUMU. It's part of the content party. You might know more about it, Julie. I mean, I'm
Yeah,
gonna be there for sure.
yeah, thanks. Great question, Sid.
Thanks.
We're gonna be putting a link up after this at the end of the session too, but the event is live on numulosgatos.org. If you want to go to our events section, it'll have more details, but yeah, it's Thursday evening. You can register to attend, and there will be a couple different types of performances that night as well. So make sure you can pick up your if you're interested, you can pick up an issue of Content Magazine, and NUMU is mentioned a couple times. It'll be fun. Yeah, so there's the website at the bottom, numulosgatos.org/events/content pickup party. Thanks, Michelle. So Alex, one more thing. What else are you working on right now? Where else can we find your work?
Oh, so I just got out of an opening right now at USF. Is it US? At USF. So I literally came directly from that opening to here. So I have other works that I've made in the last few years, different projects that I put up there in their gallery. But one of the main things that I brought is that I put up is I was supposed to have an art show 2 years ago at Acción Latina in the Mission, but because of the pandemic, it got postponed. So I was never able to show this work in San Francisco. And so this body of work is this body of work is called Staying Positive, and it's about HIV identity. It was kind of and it was supposed to be like the opposite of the AIDS quilt, where instead of, because the AIDS quilt's all about death, I wanted to do something about life and how HIV identity is different now, and kind of like get rid of stigmas in the Latin community about that. And also, as somebody who's HIV positive, like that's also an aspect of my identity, is like and also like, like I said, like every little thing patches together. So I wanted to bring that. I'm just happy that I was able to bring that back to San Francisco, where it was originally supposed to be shown. And so that's going to be up until November. So if you go to their library, there's a gallery in the back. And I think you can go there anytime during their operating hours to see it. Yeah, and if you follow my Instagram, I think they're going to be doing events that I'm going to be part of as well. And then I also have another body of work that I'm showing. I don't know the exact date, but I might be showing some body of work at Acción Latina either in September, at sometime in September. I just don't know. So I'm gonna put my Instagram down here in the chat room, so you all know how to follow. Because I don't know the exact dates for that body of work yet, but yeah, that's some stuff that I'm working at the moment for now, and then hopefully after that I'll be able to breathe for a minute.
Yeah, this has been such a busy year for you.
But yeah, well, I mean, I just, after this is done, I want to be able to experiment. And like I said, somebody mentioned, like I was thinking about doing some wearable stuff, but I was thinking performance, or like, I don't know yet, but I've been wanting to make some
Yes.
wearable art, I guess.
Yes.
So let's see how that goes.
That would be, such a showcase of that wearable, the garments.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Does anybody else have any questions before we head out? And again, thank you all who made it. I'm going to be I think they're recording it too, so we'll be able to post this. I know some people didn't make it, so I'll be able to post this. If you all know somebody that missed this, like let me or Jen or Julie.
Yeah.
Sorry.
We'll be sharing the video on our website, on our YouTube channel. So
yes,
remind your friends to check it out.
Yeah.
Thank you everyone who joined us, and
thank you, and be safe out there.
And thank you to our sponsors again, Penumbra, the Baymec Community Foundation, and the Waitte Foundation. Thanks so much, Alex. Take care. Talk to you soon.